We are witnessing the transformation of American foreign policy into a mob protection racket. This is not diplomacy. This is not strategic negotiation. This is a hostage situation disguised as statecraft. When the President of the United States looks at a sovereign map, points to a semi-autonomous territory of a NATO ally, and essentially says, "Give me the deed to the island or I will burn down your economy," we have left the realm of political norms entirely. We have entered a new era of executive extortion where alliances, treaties, and international law are incinerated on the altar of transactional whim. The headline sounds like a hallucination from a fever dream, but the reality is cold, hard, and imminent. Donald Trump has issued an ultimatum to our European allies: hand over control of Greenland to the United States, or face a punishing, escalating tariff war that will cripple the economies of 8 NATO nations. The timeline is set. The gun is on the table. Starting February 1st, a 10% tariff hits. By June 1st, it cranks up to 25%. This is not a trade dispute. This is an acquisition strategy that treats the North Atlantic Treaty Organization not as a defensive alliance against tyranny, but as a distressed asset to be liquidated for parts. But beneath the bluster, beneath the absurdity of trying to buy a landmass in the year 2026, like it is a distressed casino in Atlantic City, there is a much darker, much more technical legal war being waged in the shadows. This is where the story shifts from a geopolitical farce to a constitutional crisis. While the world stares at the map of Greenland, the real battle is happening inside the United States Supreme Court. We are standing on the precipice of a ruling that will decide not just the fate of these tariffs, but the fate of the American presidency itself. The administration is operating on a presumption of absolute power, utilizing the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, as a blunt instrument to bypass Congress. This act was designed for catastrophic emergencies, to freeze the assets of terrorists, to sanction rogue states like Iran or North Korea, to stop money laundering by drug cartels. It was never intended to be used as a line-item veto on the global economy or as a weapon to coerce friendly nations into territorial concessions. Yet, this administration has weaponized the concept of emergency. In their view, everything is an emergency if it stands in the way of the president's desire. A trade deficit is an emergency. Immigration is an emergency. The refusal of Denmark to sell a massive island is now apparently a national emergency. Trade attorneys and constitutional scholars are currently screaming into the void, warning that the Supreme Court's looming decision on the legality of IEEPA tariffs could detonate this entire strategy. If the court adheres to the text of the law, if they actually apply a strict constructionist reading, they should rule that the president does not have the unilateral authority to levy taxes on American consumers under the guise of emergency powers without congressional approval. Remember, a tariff is a tax. The Constitution gives the power of the purse, the power to tax, explicitly to Congress. By seizing this power, the executive branch is effectively dissolving the separation of powers. However, relying on the Supreme Court to check this expansion of power is a gamble with odds that no sane bookmaker would take. We are hearing from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who appeared on Sunday television with the calm confidence of a man who knows the fix is in. He called it very unlikely that the court would overturn the president's use of these powers. That confidence is chilling. It suggests an executive branch that views the judiciary not as a co-equal branch of government, but as a rubber stamp for the mega agenda. They are betting that the conservative majority on the bench will prioritize the expansion of executive authority over the letter of the law. But let's play the forensic game. Let's assume for a moment that the Supreme Court actually does its job. Let's assume they rule that the IEPA tariffs are illegal, that the president cannot simply wake up and tax NATO members because he wants to buy Greenland. Does the administration back down? Do they apologize to Denmark and return to normal diplomacy? Absolutely not. This is what you need to understand about the current architecture of power in Washington. There is always a backup plan, and the backup plan is usually more draconian than the original. If IEPA is struck down, the administration has already signaled they will pivot immediately to Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. This is the national security loophole. It is the legislative equivalent of a break glass in case of emergency hammer that has been abused so thoroughly it barely resembles a law anymore. Section 232 allows the president to restrict imports if they threaten national security. And here is where the Greenland narrative takes a turn from real estate vanity project to resource warfare. Greenland is not just ice and rock. It is a treasure trove of critical minerals, rare earth elements that are essential for everything from fighter jets to iPhone batteries. The administration has recently completed a Section 232 investigation into critical minerals, creating a pre-packaged legal justification to declare that our lack of control over Greenland's resources is a threat to the national security of the United States. By framing the purchase of Greenland as a matter of supply chain survival against China, they bypass the economic arguments and move directly into the realm of national defense, where the courts are historically terrified to intervene. This is the sleight of hand. They will claim that Denmark's refusal to sell threatens American military readiness. They will claim that European reluctance to hand over sovereignty is an act of aggression against American industry. And under Section 232, the president can impose tariffs, quotas, or embargoes with virtually no oversight. The White House proclamation from January explicitly reserves the right to impose these restrictions if satisfactory agreements are not reached in a timely manner. Translated from legalese, that means, give us what we want, or we crush you using the justification of national security. We are looking at a scenario where the law is fluid, malleable, and entirely subservient to the leader's will. TD Cowen analysts are already advising their clients that Section 232 remains a powerful and unaffected tool, regardless of what the Supreme Court does with IEEPA. This is the definition of a rigged game. If the president loses on Plan A, he switches to Plan B, and the result is the same. The tariffs go up, the alliances fracture, and the rule of law is eroded a little further. Consider the message this sends to the rest of the world. We are telling our closest allies that their sovereignty is conditional. We are telling NATO, the most successful military alliance in human history, that its members are merely vassal states subject to the resource extraction needs of the American empire. The psychological impact on the European bloc cannot be overstated. We are forcing them to look at Washington not as a partner, but as a predator. When you threaten to tank the economies of 8 friendly nations because they won't sell you land, you are not acting like a superpower. You are acting like a colonial overlord from the 19th century. And what happens to the companies caught in the crossfire? The global supply chain is not a light switch you can flick on and off. If these tariffs hit in February, costs skyrocket instantly. American manufacturers who rely on European imports will bleed cash. Consumers will see prices jump at the shelf. But the administration does not care about the microeconomic pain. They are playing a macro game of dominance. They are willing to inflict pain on American businesses to prove a point about American power. It is a philosophy of burn the village to save it, applied to global trade. Legal experts like Michael Lowell at Reed Smith are suggesting that companies might have to sue to enforce a Supreme Court ruling if the administration tries to ignore it or pivot too quickly. Think about the chaos of that sentence. We are discussing a reality where private companies have to sue their own government to force it to obey a Supreme Court order. That is the hallmark of a failing state, where the executive branch goes rogue and the only recourse is years of expensive litigation while the economy burns. The administration's arrogance is palpable. They have explicitly stated that even if they lose in court, new tariffs will go into effect immediately. They are telling us, openly and to our faces, that the court's decision is a minor speed bump, not a stop sign. This is the behavior of an executive branch that believes it has transcended the Constitution. They are operating on the theory of the unitary executive on steroids. The idea that the president's power in foreign affairs and national security is absolute and unreviewable. And let's look deeper at the critical minerals justification. It is true that the U.S. is lagging in rare earth processing. It is true that China dominates this market. But the solution to a supply chain vulnerability is investment, innovation, and partnership, not hostile takeovers of allied territory. By using the critical minerals argument to justify a hostile shakedown of Greenland, the administration is degrading the very concept of national security. They are using a legitimate concern as a Trojan horse for an illegitimate power grab. It cheapens the argument. When real national security threats emerge, who will believe the boy who cried wolf when the wolf was just a real estate deal? The use of Section 232 in this manner also exposes the utter abdication of duty by the United States Congress. For decades, Congress has willingly handed over its constitutional authorities to the president, Terrified of taking hard votes, happy to let the White House take the heat. They passed the Trade Expansion Act in 1962, thinking it would be used responsibly. They passed IEEPA, thinking it would be used for emergencies. They created a monster, and now that monster has broken its chains and is eating the village. There is not a whisper of resistance from the legislative branch. The Senate is silent. The House is complicit. The checks and balances have failed. We are left with a geopolitical landscape that is terrifyingly unstable. If the U.S. proceeds with these tariffs, Europe will retaliate. They will have to. No sovereign nation can accept this kind of humiliation without fighting back. We will see counter tariffs on American agriculture, on American tech, on American manufacturing. We are sleepwalking into a trade war with our own friends at a time when the world is already on fire. And for what? For a headline? For a map? For the ego of a man who sees nations as properties to be acquired? The transaction costs of this strategy are incalculable. We are spending down the capital of trust that took 80 years to build. When the next real crisis hits, when Russia moves further west or China moves on Taiwan, we will turn to our allies and find an empty room. You cannot extort your friends on Monday and expect them to fight for you on Tuesday. This is the forensic reality of the situation. It is not just about the price of goods or the ownership of an Arctic island. It is about the systemic dismantling of the rules-based international order. It is about the replacement of law with leverage. The Supreme Court case is the last line of defense, and even that line is looking thin, brittle, and easily circumvented. The Greenland strategy is a microcosm of the entire MAGA governance philosophy. Take what you want, break the rules to get it, and dare anyone to stop you. As we watch the deadline of February 1st approach, we must understand that we are watching a stress test of the American experiment. Can a president effectively rewrite the map of the world through economic coercion? Can the judiciary stop a rogue executive? Does the Constitution still matter when the person in the Oval Office decides it is inconvenient? These are not rhetorical questions. These are the questions that will define the next decade of human history. The sheer audacity of the move is designed to stun us into silence. It is designed to make us accept the unacceptable because resisting it seems too exhausting. They want us to shrug and say, well, that's just how it is now. They want the abnormality to feel normal. They want the chaos to feel routine. But we cannot afford to be numb. We have to look at this autopsy and see the cause of death for what it is: a deliberate, premeditated murder of democratic norms. The mechanisms of the state are being rewired to serve the whims of one man. The Treasury Department, the Department of Commerce, the trade representatives, they are all being deployed as soldiers in a war against our own alliances. The machinery of government is humming, but it is humming a funeral dirge for the republic we thought we knew. The tariff weapon is loaded, the safety is off, and it is pointed directly at the heart of the Atlantic Alliance. This is the reality the mainstream media is too polite to describe in full. They will call it unconventional diplomacy. They will call it hardball negotiation. Do not let them soften the language. This is a shakedown. This is a racket. And if it succeeds, it establishes a precedent that turns the President of the United States into a global warlord, ruling by decree, taxing by whim, and answering to no one. The Supreme Court may rule this week, or they may delay. But the intent of the administration is clear. They are taking Greenland, or they are taking your money, and they do not care what the law says about it. The chaos is the point. The instability is the leverage. And while we argue about the details of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the ground beneath our feet is shifting. The tectonic plates of geopolitics are grinding together, and the earthquake is coming. You need to understand that this is not an isolated incident. This is the blueprint. If they can do this to Denmark, they can do it to anyone. If they can use emergency powers to rewrite trade laws for a land grab, there is no limit to what they can use those powers for at home. The precedent set here will be used against domestic enemies next. The tariff weapon is just the beginning. We are watching the dismantling of the guardrails. The system is blinking red. And most people are just changing the channel. Do not change the channel. Do not look away. If you are tired of the sanitized, both sides coverage that refuses to call this what it is, then you are in the right place. We do not just read the headlines here. We dissect the threat. We are building a community of people who refuse to be gaslit by authoritarian absurdity. If you want the raw, unfiltered truth that the corporate networks are too afraid to broadcast, then you need to subscribe right now. Join us. Get inside the wire, because knowing the playbook is the only way to survive what comes next.